We've allowed them to do it. We've allowed them to influence public policy in this province, in this country, and now in this world. The Fraser Institute is one of these think tanks, one of these nonpartisan research organizations that brought McCarthyism and red baiting and the anti-socialist movement into like the 21st century. And I'm surprised that this was able to come out of a place like Vancouver. Despite being discredited a lot by the media over the years, it was actually the media, they took advantage of the media in order to push dogma like this. Like, no matter what, affirm that Canada is a left-wing country, which I think we all know, like, isn't really true. British Columbia has always been pretty politically polarized, probably the least developed out of anywhere else in North America. It relies heavily on resource extraction, mining, forestry. Resource extraction, as we've seen historically, leads to a lot of unionized labor. It's because these employees don't like to be treated as chattel property. Fraser Institute has always pushed that unions are a massive problem. They're a barrier to economic growth and innovation and all the typical stuff you'd see in like an Ayn Rand novel. The Fraser Institute was founded by this guy, T. Patrick Boyle. He wrote this really good book, actually, on elections in British Columbia in the 80s. He actually advocates for things like Elections BC, like a nonpartisan board to kind of oversee electoral boundary changes and things like that. He doesn't seem to like that a small percentage of voters in BC will swing an election between these very heavily divided parties, the NDP on the left, and what was Social Credit, what was then the BC Liberals, and is now the BC Conservatives on the right. T. Patrick Boyle was heavily involved in resource extraction, particularly one company, McMillan Bloedel, which was like, this was a massive company, massive logging company. He had every incentive to keep McMillan Bloedel and therefore the Social Credit or BC Liberals or whoever. However, the big money needs politics in BC to work. He was going to advocate for every coalition to keep the NDP out of power. T. Patrick Boyle founded the Fraser Institute after a very brief period of NDP government in British Columbia in the 1970s. I've heard rumor, and I can't confirm this, but I've heard people tell me the story. He had a personal vendetta against this government because of the agricultural land reserve. Because of a housing development in Chilliwack on Fairfield Island that became part of the agricultural land reserve and therefore was unable to be developed into housing. He started the Fraser Institute with Michael Walker, an economist, and they've been preaching the gospel of the free market ever since. They're the ones behind the school ranking thing because they know that immigrants coming to this country with money are going to look up what neighborhoods to find the best schools. That's a big driver in real estate prices. The whole thing is just so shady, and the fact that we continue to let this go on, they're not breaking any laws. Not only that they've been allowed to do this, but that we've allowed them to do it. That potentially started because of a subdivision on Fairfield Island in Chilliwack.